chapters this week to do. Chapter 4 is on global management, and then we'll do chapter 5, and then we'll make sure on Thursday that we talk about test taking for next week. Okay, this is coming up pretty quick here, so we're going to look at managing in a global environment today. We're going to start off with a short video again, very, very short, and then we will take a look at the PowerPoints. I will bring you all PowerPoints in South Boston on Thursday. Let's get this going. All right, so we're looking at the PowerPoint. We're looking at Blackboard right now. This is our week's information here. We do have chapter 4 and 5 this week under the week 3 materials. Both of them are there. There is also a week 3 homework assignment listed there, so make sure you're taking a look at that. This one has you go out and take a look at some information on a website about a career in management and answering some questions there. Again, you want to just go to Microsoft Word and create a document and attach it there. Don't email your answer. Don't use the right submission button. No more than a page again, okay? And I will get to grading the ones that you turned in for last week pretty quick here. So don't forget that. That's due, let's see, that's due Sunday by midnight as well. All right, so let's look at our video on what a global manager is. Again, it's a very short video.
Just what is the global manager? There is one point of view that says just a manager. There is another point of view that says an entirely different breed of executive that we have not seen before. My point of view is that this is an entirely different breed of executive. We have seen this executive before, but there are very few of them. Let's go back 200 or 300 years. The Hudson Bay Company, the East India Company. Did you know that the East India Company had more soldiers than the entire British Army? Did you know that the East India Company had a budget bigger than the budget of the UK, as it was called Great Britain at the time, Great Britain at the time? So what we had 250, 300 years ago was some brilliant men who could really think geography, business, market, economics, costs, profit, all at the same time. And what made them so exceptional was that they could do that across cultural boundaries. Today, what we have is just more of those executives in our major international businesses. Some of those executives have a team, and the team is close by, like in the same building. Some of those executives have a team that's very distant. Then they actually meet 1 or 2 members of their team once a week. And the 30 or so that report to them, they could meet only once a month. Yet they have to behave as if they are a team that's close by. So when you go across cultural boundaries, you have to do certain things. The first is build trust. Build trust with people who have a different point of view to you and who also have a different cultural basis. The second is build commitment. Build commitment with people who may actually be applying and pursuing very different strategic objectives. And the third is build a warmth of relationship. Now that may not be too easy, because being a nice guy is not what's required. What's required is to be nice and resilient, pleasant, warm, and yet make the tough decisions. So building a team and being tough requires that all the team members are like you. They can see the bigger picture, they can understand the business, they can understand the constraints and the cultural differences, and yet they can speak the truth. That resilience building that transgresses different cultural norms is something that emotionally is not easy to do. But today's global manager, intellectually sharp and emotionally well prepared, is the sort of guy you need to build those international teams that make your global manager.
Okay, so just a taste of what we're going to be talking about today. We're talking about, of course, crossing over country boundaries and being sure that we are all encompassing in our management styles. And there are various different degrees of that. So we're going to start off looking at involvement internationally first off. Got it over here. I don't see the PowerPoint showing up in yours.
How's it going? Sorry.
Let me, no PowerPoint in Christiana either, right? Does anybody see the PowerPoint?
No.
All right, let me stop the share and reshare. There we go. Yes. Okay. All right, so in this chapter, we are going to be looking at what international management is, how we categorize organizations with different levels of international involvement. We'll talk about what a multinational corporation is, some information about people who work in multinational corporations, how those 4 management functions, the planning and the organizing and the leading and the controlling, all relate to multinational corporations, what a transnational organization is, and some other special topics that will impact those. So again, what we are talking about here in this particular chapter is management activities going across national boundaries, so crossing countries there. And we're going to look at how we can put an emphasis on foreign country management as well as management within your own country. Now, we'll see that it's extremely important for us to spend some time talking about global management because we have a tremendous amount of money invested abroad. U.S. firms have close to $4 billion invested abroad, whereas other countries have quite a bit of money invested in us, but not as much. So we see it coming and going both ways, and I imagine that when they update this for the new edition, we're going to see it actually going off the scale up here. Clearly, our U.S. investment abroad, by country, we invest more in Canada than anywhere else, simply because of its proximity. Okay, then we have a great deal of investment in Europe and Asia and the Pacific countries, but much less in the countries that are considered to be developing countries. So people may forget about Canada, but a huge amount of investment taking place in Canada. Now, other countries investing in us, clearly Europe has almost 3/4 of that. European nations are heavily invested in the United States, followed up by Asian Pacific countries. So here's our little continuum of international involvement, starting off at the left end of the spectrum where we have very little or no involvement at all with international operations. That's an organization that is purely domestic. It has not crossed boundaries in any way yet. Then we have the second level, international organizations, meaning they're having some activity in other nations. They're probably just selling to other nations, that type of thing. But as we get on to level 3, we are looking at organizations that have actually become multinational, meaning they're having companies and firms and buildings and so on set up in other countries as well. And then we go transnational to the highest level of involvement there. All right, so getting to be further down that spectrum, down to a level 3, where you become a multinational corporation, which, by the way, are typically called MNCs. There are stages, 6 stages of development in that multinationalization. Starting off with, again, the lowest level of involvement would be just exporting your products to foreign countries. Doesn't mean you really have a presence in another country, but you are selling your goods to foreign countries. Stage 2 is when you start setting up sales organizations abroad. So you actually have a sales location in a foreign country or more than one. Stage 3, you begin to have foreign firms acquire licenses, use your patents for your goods, get the ins and outs of your products so that they can make and sell them. Stage 4, they're actually their manufacturing facilities set up in foreign countries. Stage 5, management becomes multinationalized. That means that you're not just operating from one country, you've actually got managers in other countries as well. Stage 6, your stockholders become multinationalized as well. There are stockholders throughout all the countries owning portions of the company itself. This chart is so teeny tiny, I don't think that I would expect to be able to read that off of a screen anywhere. So it just tells you the 6 variables over here to the left and how they are requiring firms to actually get more and more heavily involved internationally. So I'll let you perhaps take a look at that one in your textbook. It is figure 4.5, so you can get in a little closer view of that, but I don't think you're probably going to be able to read it on the screen. Now, of course, there are risks that go along with going international, which is why some domestic companies choose not to do that. It usually requires a substantial investment, meaning big bucks, okay? Big bucks to get into those foreign countries. But there are risk involved in how much you can expect as far as a return goes on those investments. Many companies just don't even begin to understand the risks that they're taking, so they just say, oh, enough, I don't even want to get involved in this. They're uncertain about their outcomes that they could get by going internationally, and they may face serious financial problems from investing in foreign countries. Okay. However, done correctly, we can see that this is a big payoff for a lot of companies as well. Multinational corporations are made up of 3 different types of people working there. The first is an expatriate, expat, you may have heard them called. That is when a company's employee lives in a country where they do not have citizenship. So let's say I'm working for a company that is a U.S. company, but they now are operating in France. I went to France and lived there in order to do my work, but did not change my citizenship. I still was an American citizen. I would be an expatriate. A host country national is a member of a company who is a citizen of a country where the foreign-based organization is located. So that would be someone in, for the example I just gave, someone who is a citizen of France, living and working there, but the company is typically an American company, even though they're doing business in France. But the company has hired a French citizen to actually work for them. And then a third country national is when you have a company member who is a citizen of one country and works for an organization headquartered in another country. Okay? So that's a third country national involved. Those people who are expatriates and third country nationals, they're living and working in countries that are not their home countries, their native countries. Okay, so that takes them quite a bit besides just knowing the business. They have got to adjust to a new culture.
What's the difference between the two?
Between an expatriate and a third country national, that could be a third country actually involves a third one. Suppose you've got a U.S. company operating in France, but you've got a British person working for that company. So there's a third country involved if they have come into France to work for it.
Okay.
So it could be cheaper for the country to actually hire somebody from Great Britain because it's closer to work there than it would be to send somebody over from the United States. So they're still not a citizen of France, but perhaps they have a little better feeling about what the country's all about. Now, living in a foreign country is a lot of cultural things involved besides just learning a new language. Okay? People tend to think about, well, how am I going to communicate? Because their language may be different, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Okay? There are differences in food, differences in weather, differences in attitudes, perceptions. Okay? What seems normal or correct to you may be totally different in a foreign country. Okay? And some of that is easily adapted. Others of it's not so easy. For instance, we have, well, I know when I just went on a vacation and visited Paris, France, it was tough for me because one thing, they don't have peanut butter. Okay? Peanut butter is not something that you can buy at the grocery store there at all. Okay? And I live off peanut butter. Okay? Another thing, mayonnaise on a sandwich is something absolutely unheard of. First of all, they don't have sliced bread like we do. They put them on those French baguettes. And then what they use instead of mayonnaise is butter. Put butter on their sandwiches. Okay? You order a pizza. Okay? You know what's going to be right smack in the middle of that pizza? An egg, sunny side up. Okay? Those are things that certainly are not life-threatening or so bad that I couldn't adjust to them or something. But the first time you see it, you may react a little strangely to it. You've got to understand what is normal for them.
So it's like for the military then, people that travel. I know my cousin, he was in Japan, and he said that was a different cultural shock.
Absolutely. Japan has a no. When you get into cultures like Asian cultures, you find that their attitudes towards women are different. Their attitudes towards what your dedication to your job is like. We have countries where you go to work when you finish your schooling, and you stay at that same company for your entire life. Very different type of attitude for Americans who tend to change jobs. The older, I would say the younger the person is, they're more likely to change jobs than my daddy. When my daddy grew up, he was sort of in the old school where you did go to work for one company and you pretty much stayed there. But we've gotten to the point where we move around our jobs a lot. Okay, a lot. Okay. Also, in some countries, it's education is not the big thing. You get your job when you graduate, whatever the equivalent of high school is in those countries, and you learn everything on the job. You start off at the lowest level. You may be in the mail room sorting mail and work your way up. It doesn't matter how much education you have. So very, very different cultural things that may take a lot to get used to. Women, again, I mentioned that one. In some countries, women are not allowed to walk side by side with men. They must walk behind them. And you can imagine how that flows over to the working world. Even if they have allowed women in the workplace, they take a subservient stance behind a man. So, again, you would not have the right if you went into that company in a foreign city to tell them that they're doing things wrong, because that's their culture. Okay, that's just the way they are. So you have to learn to adapt. The language stuff. I've heard many cases where people went to foreign countries and they actually offended somebody by a hand gesture or a nod or something like that, perceived totally different in foreign countries. So you have to really be kind of prep yourself for some of that before you get yourself in trouble if you do go. But what a wonderful, wonderful way to broaden your knowledge of what the world is about, to realize that just because we do something the way we do it here in the United States, it doesn't make it right. Okay? It's just different. Repatriation is when you actually bring an expatriate back home. This has gotten to be a real problem for a lot of companies because they have sent people to foreign countries to work. Those people became ingrained in what was going on in those foreign countries. And then when they come back to the U.S., they find the U.S. to be strange. Okay, so there's a lot of training that has to take place to re-immerse them back into the environment of the United States. Okay, the next few slides just tie together our 4 functions of management and put them on a global scale so you can see that they are tied to each piece of that. The first, of course, is planning, deciding how your organization is going to achieve its objectives. So here's some of the things that you would be involved in as a global manager. The importing and exporting decisions, license agreements. Okay, I will tell you straight up, legal things are very different from country to country. So you have to be very careful there. Direct investing or joint ventures. And then looking at all those trade agreements that we have, like NAFTA, the European Union. So have to make sure you read what can be traded, what cannot be traded among countries, what kind of tariffs are involved, lots of things that you have to be up on before you can just jump in and start running a business there. So from the planning side, those are a few things. Your organizational structure and your management selection may differ from country to country. I could not, if I went to a country where women were not equal to men, I couldn't just walk in there and start putting women as vice presidents or anything like that. I would have to learn how to adapt to their way of thinking, or otherwise the company will just not survive. Okay. There are different attitudes that managers have toward foreign operations, ethnocentric, polycentric, geocentric. They just look, those are just terms, fancy terms as to how much you focus on your company itself or whether you're including the whole big picture type thing, many polyunions, so you're looking at many different organizations and so on, or whether you're going to focus on geographics. As far as the leading piece of it goes, again, culture is the biggie. All right. Some of the values that differ from country to country include power, distance. Okay. In some countries, it would be extremely inappropriate for a firm's janitor to speak to the president. Okay. Very different than it would be, I mean, here, when our president walks out, he's as likely to say good morning to one of our buildings and grounds people as he is to, one of the vice presidents or something. So power distance is different. Uncertainty avoidance. Many foreign countries don't want to take risk. Okay, if there's anything uncertain about something, they will not go for it. Whether you're an individualist or whether you like to make team decisions, they differ from country to country. Again, masculinity and femininity are very different from country to country. What's considered to be masculine and feminine. And then whether or not you're focusing on the short term or the long term, again, it varies a lot. And lastly, the last function, the controlling. Of course, you're going to be dealing with labor cost, which can, we know, be extremely different from country to country. We know that working on manufacturing lines in some countries is much cheaper than it is in other countries. They will hire children to work, that kind of thing. The quality of the products is something very different. Many countries do not focus on quality, they focus on quantity. Keeping inventory, that's a biggie. Okay? Our Japanese type firms have lots of interaction with their suppliers and vendors that they don't keep a lot of inventory around. They are supplied it right when they need it. That's that just-in-time management. Okay. Of course, you go all the way to the other end of the spectrum when we're looking at transnational organizations. They are completely global. There is no home base. Okay. That just means that the boundaries that are there are consequential. The firm just does business wherever it makes sense. Okay. So a firm that is a transnational organization is everywhere. They don't call any one place their home or their headquarters. They look at the business as being totally global, and they are not loyal to any one country. That's gotten to the full spectrum of global business. Some special issues concern ethics. What's ethical in one country may not be ethical somewhere else, and vice versa. Okay? For instance, bribery, certainly unethical here in the United States, completely okay in many foreign countries. They bribe their officials, their political officials, and so on to get their business to grow or to be able to produce certain products. That's certainly not something that's accepted in the United States. Respecting core human rights. Okay, that child labor is one of those. Okay, here in the U.S., we don't think it's right to employ children or to hire workers and make them work over a certain number of hours a day, that sort of stuff. The respect that we give is not always abundant in other societies. Local traditions. Okay, you may go into a country where it's a local tradition to have a certain day as a holiday, and that holiday may not have meant a thing to you, okay, while you were a United States citizen. So you need to respect. You don't go in and change that kind of thing. Situational determination of right from wrong. Some countries go along with that. Others have some hard and fast rules. This is right, this is wrong. All right, so suppose you are a manager and you are getting ready to send some of your country or home country's employees over for a foreign assignment. You just hand them an airplane ticket and say go? No way. You ought not to do that, for sure. You need to help train them, give them profiles of the culture, help them adapt to the culture. Not only that, logistical information. I mean, they need to know things like, how do I get around in this country? You know, is there a public transit, or do we each have our own vehicles, or you know, any kind of information like that is available. And then the application, of course, you should give them additional information as far as applying what they're learning once they get there. Okay, so let me get rid of that. And get back here. Okay. What we really should get out of all this is that for a company to succeed, they may choose to go international. Okay, but they can go from the very lowest level where they're just exporting products to another country, all the way up to becoming a transnational company which has no allegiance to any one particular country. Okay, but along the way in those stages, you as a manager are going to be needed to use all four of your functions there. All four. Okay, you cannot just dump your employees off in a foreign country and expect them to do their job and survive properly. Okay, neither can you just tell them to come home and just let them go back into the workplace without some adjustment there as well. I can imagine that if you've lived in a foreign country that drove on the other side of the highway, what an adjustment that would be for a while. But what about when you move back to the United States? They may feel like they need to drive on the other side. Just simple things like that. Very simple things can be something that you can do as a manager to help these people understand what they can expect when they get there and what they can expect when they get home. Okay. So does anybody have any comments, questions? Anybody been to a foreign country, lived there? I know more than just a vacation, but anybody here lived in a foreign country that you have? Any differences?
I mean, there are a lot of differences. I was really young when we did. So
Oh, okay. So you probably, the younger people tend to, if you were a child, tend to absorb that stuff fairly easily. You know, that's how they, like they say that younger people learn languages so much faster because, yeah, they just have already, something about the brain is not trying to translate, it's actually learning the different language. It's one of the things I regret most about my life is that I'm not bilingual. I can read French, but I cannot listen to someone else talk it and comprehend more than every 5 or 6 words or something like that. So, and I certainly can't speak it. Although when I went to Canada, I went to a French-speaking part of Canada, I did know how to ask for my hamburger with cheese. So that was about as far as I got. So that was about it. But I regret not being bilingual. So if you ever get a chance to immerse yourself in a foreign country and learn their language, I highly recommend it. It'll get you on many, many places in businesses because they are looking for bilingual people, truly looking for them. So, and anybody who has international business experience at all, they love it. Go somewhere and have a opportunity to even just do an internship abroad. That you do what you have to do to make it work.
Well, it's the only way a company survived now. My company went out of business because it was a strictly American company. But then there's other companies, they put their work out to China, Japan, whatever, and their cabinets were coming in cheaper quality, but they were getting them so quick.
Yeah, competition just ate them up. That's right. So, I mean, you as a manager are going to be faced with decisions. Do I try to stay domestic or do I go out? And you know, you really got some hard things to think about there. So, do you want, because usually when you extend your borders, you may actually be cutting back on your jobs domestically. So you might be hurting people in your domestic country, but then there are opportunities for some of them to go abroad and learn as well. So, and help out the country. So you really, as a business manager, have to start looking at your domain as being the world rather than just your region or your country. There are places for people, I mean, like, yes, I'm in the South, there are certain things that people in the South want that people in some other part of the United States don't want, that some other people, like the peanut butter, okay? Nobody in France wanted peanut butter. Well, then I'm not going to go in and try to sell peanut butter in France. They just have not acquired a taste for it. But I bet you I can find something they want that's similar to peanut butter and learn how to manufacture it and try to sell it there. They like that Nutella stuff. Do you like it? No, I don't like that stuff. I don't know. Although I recently have adapted to almond butter instead of peanut butter. And it's pretty good. So. Do you know that, this is really an aside, but I read that peanuts are not nuts, they're beans. And almonds are, so that's why I decided to switch because nuts are supposed to be healthier for you. So. That's your piece of trivia today. Peanuts are not nuts. They're beans. Okay? Any other comments on anything? Okay. Love it. This class over here, not a single one of them was working on their telephone today, their cell phone. So I'm happy for you. All right. We're out a little bit early, but go right ahead. Make sure you're cleaning up and get that